Hello class, today's lesson is lesson 9-5 in your algebra textbooks. The title is Solve Quadratic Equations by Completing the Square. So yesterday we did some solving of quadratic equations. Today is a new method called completing the square, and what you're going to look for is when you have an expression that has an x squared plus some number times x, we're actually going to change this by adding one more very special number to it. We're going to add a constant to this expression. We're going to call that constant c. So we're going to find this very specific number, c, so that now this is a perfect square trinomial. Okay? And this process is called completing the square. That's by adding this very specific constant c. So completing the square. For example, if we had x squared plus, let's say 6x plus 9, okay, if I was able to add this very specific number, I'd be able to rewrite this as x plus 3 squared. That's what we're looking for, is looking for adding a very specific number so that we can have this perfect square trinomial and be able to rewrite it as a binomial being squared. So what you want to learn from this is that if you have x squared plus some number times x, you can find that third number by simply taking that number b and dividing it by 2, right? And when we square that, we're going to find our final number. So for instance, in this example, I divided 6 by 2 and I got 3, and when I squared it, I got 9. So this is what we are looking for, just in general, to be able to rewrite it in the form x plus b divided by 2 and having that whole thing squared. So this is something that I'm going to bubble. It's going to be very helpful in this whole lesson. So why don't we look at an example and do this ourselves, okay? So for this first one, all right, I have x squared plus 5x plus some number c. So I'm already told that I want to figure out what this c is to make it a perfect square trinomial. Okay, when I found that, then I'm going to rewrite this expression as the square of a binomial. So if I want to figure out what this c is, I am going to simply divide the number 5 by 2, and I'm going to square that whole thing. So this is going to be 5 squared is 25. 2 squared is 4. So the number, the constant that I'm going to add to this expression is going to be 25 fourths. So let me write that down for you. X squared plus 5x plus 25 fourths. That right there is going to be the expression adding in this constant. And so if I was going to rewrite this expression as the square of binomial, that would be the same as x plus this number right here, 5 halves being squared. And this is really going to help you to be able to solve for x later on when we have a full equation. Right now we just have an expression. So let's try this whole process one more time. Down here I have x squared plus 8x plus c. So again, all that I want you to do is to find the c and then rewrite this expression so it's the square of a binomial. Okay, so all I'm looking for in the beginning is c. And I'm going to do that by taking this middle term, okay, and the number in front of it is the number 8. So I'm going to take that, I'm going to divide it by 2, and I'm also going to square it. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. And 4 squared is 16. So the number that I'm going to add to my expression, x squared plus 8x, is 16. All right, now this looks like a perfect square trinomial. And if I was going to rewrite this, it would be x plus 4 being squared. All right? So this was just a little bit of practice in completing the square by first just finding that constant in both of these that we would add to the expression we're given, so then we can turn it into a perfect square. Now we know once we have equations that if we ever want to add anything, subtract anything, multiply, divide anything, you have to do the same to both sides of an equal sign. So here I do have a full equation. X squared minus 16x is equal to negative 15. And I want you to solve this by completing the square. So we ourselves need to now figure out, what am I going to add to turn this expression into a perfect square? And that still is going to be equal to negative 15. And if I'm going to add something here, I definitely need to add it to the other side as well. So again, how do I find what this constant is that I'm going to add? Well, I'm going to take this number, negative 16, to find my c, and I'm going to divide it by 2, and I'm also going to square it. So negative 16 divided by 2 is negative 8, and negative 8 squared is 64. So in this case, the number I'm going to add to both sides is 64. Can you see that? So now this expression, x squared minus 16x plus 64, can be rewritten as the perfect square, a binomial, x minus 8 being squared. And then the right side, I'm going to simplify this. What is negative 15 plus 64? Well, that's 49. Okay? So now I'm very close to solving for x. This looks very similar to what I did yesterday. Okay? So we have completed the square. Now we're just going to finish solving it. And I can do that by taking the square root of both sides of my equation to get rid of this square, this exponent. So now I'm left with x minus 8 is equal to, what is the square root of 49? Well, it's 7, or it's negative 7, which means I need to put plus or minus 7. I'm almost done. I'm getting x by itself, so now I'm going to add the 8 to both sides. I'm left with x is equal to 8 plus or minus 7. Whenever you have that plus or minus, you need to split it up. 8 plus 7 as one of them, and 8 minus 7 as another. So my two solutions are going to be 15 and 1. Okay, so x in this case equals 15, or it could also equal 1. There are two solutions for this equation. So that wasn't too bad. Why don't we try one more? Okay, I have x squared minus 2x is equal to 3. And again, I want to solve this by completing the square. So similar to the example right up above, I'm going to rewrite it, x squared minus 2x, and I'm going to look for that specific number that I can add to make this a perfect trinomial. Set that equal to the 3, and because I add it to one side, I have to add it to the other side as well. So to find that specific number c, I'm going to take my middle value, which is negative 2, and I'm going to divide it by 2 and square it. Negative 2 divided by positive 2 is negative 1. When you square that, it is just simply positive 1. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. When I do that, this left-hand side can be rewritten as a square of a binomial. So this is going to be x minus 1 being squared is equal to 3 plus 1 is 4. This looks fairly simple now. I'm going to take the square root of both sides, and I have x minus 1 on the left-hand side, and the square root of 4 is going to be plus or minus 2. Okay, another step. Let's add the 1 to both sides to get x by itself. So now x equals 1 plus or minus 2. Just like I did before, I need to separate this into the plus and the minus. So I'm going to do 1 plus 2 as one of my solutions, and 1 minus 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. 1 minus 2 is negative 1. So my two solutions for x are negative 1 and positive 3. Okay? Let's do one more example now. This looks a little bit more complicated because I have this ugly 2 at the very beginning as a coefficient. All right, and I know you guys didn't like this before, but I'm going to show you in this case it's actually very, very simple. So first, I need to move this 8 to the other side. So I'm going to have 2x squared plus 20x is equal to positive 8, because I'm going to add 8 to both sides. And look here, to get rid of this 2, I can divide everything by 2. So now rewriting it, I'm left with x squared plus 20 divided by 2 is 10x is equal to 4. Awesome. Okay. Now I'm going to complete the square, which means I'm going to add that specific constant. So we need to figure out what we're going to add in my box. That's equal to 4 plus that same constant on the right-hand side. So let's figure it out. C is going to be equal to taking my middle number, this time it's 10, dividing it by 2, and squaring it. 10 divided by 2 is 5, and 5 squared is 25. So I'm going to add 25 to both sides. Okay. When I do that, this perfect trinomial right here, this perfect square trinomial can be rewritten as x plus 5 being squared. And that's set equal to 4 plus 25 is 29. Let's get rid of this exponent by taking the square root on both sides. And now you're left with x plus 5 is equal to the square root of 29. Oh, that is something that's a little tough, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to have to get out my calculator for that because I don't know what that really is, but I do know it's going to be plus or minus. Okay, so I'm going to have to get out my graphing calculator for that. Let's do one more thing. If I'm going to subtract 5 on both sides so that I have the x by itself, I'm going to find out negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 29. And again, we're going to round that to the nearest hundredth. So I've already done this on my calculator, and the two numbers that I get for my solutions, they're actually not too bad. Okay, the first one is about 0.39, and my second solution is negative 10.39. So I do have two solutions in the end. They're not exact, but they're very, very close. Okay, so on your own, I'd like you to try one of these equations by yourself. This is x squared plus 6x is equal to 7. And I want you to solve this by completing the square, which means you need to find that extra constant that you're going to add to both the left and the right-hand side. And then you can finish going through to solve the whole problem. So come with any questions you might have to class tomorrow.